Hello guys, welcome back to episode number 3 of this course about error boundaries inside of React applications. So in this episode I have decided to talk about a very interesting topic related to error boundaries. And that topic is using different fallback UIs. So this is the, fallback UI that we've got right now, right? So whenever there is an error inside of, for example, the book component in this case, we are going to get this fallback UI. But the point is, you can have different fallback UIs for different, components. And this is something that we are going to implement inside of this video. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, please make sure you do because you need to have the context, right? The domain of work that we are, developing, and then that will, of course, help you to better understand what we are going to do in this episode. Now, let's talk about why we would probably need to have different fallback UIs. Sometimes a generic error message is not helpful. Right now, we are showing a very generic, error message. Inside of the, component, there was an error. A failed book component might show book data is unavailable. A failed page component, for example, or page might show this page has crashed. A network-related error might trigger a retry option. So there are different scenarios under which your application might fail, might crash. And for those different scenarios, it is much better, it is more user-friendly to create specific UIs, fallback UIs. And this is something that we can easily achieve using error boundaries. So different UIs improve user experience and help users understand what went wrong. Now, let's create a flexible fallback UI component. The first step is to create a reusable fallback component that you can customize. We are going to create this component called fallback UI inside of the components folder, right? And we are going to talk about the different pieces of this component. But briefly, we can use a custom title for this custom fallback UI. We can show a custom message, and we can optionally show a retry button. Take a look. This is a function component. Take a look. We have the title and message and on retry as incoming props or input props. And then we are rendering this div. We are, using these two input props, and then if on retry is true, we are going to show this button, and this onClick is going to be, associated with this on retry that we have here. So this is the fallback UI that we need to create now. Let me take you to my code, and inside of the folder, I am going to create our fallback UI.jsx, and I am going to write the code. So this is going to be our component with title, message, and on retry, and it's going to return a div wrapping a title, a message, and the button for retrying. So if, for example, your component is communicating with a backend API to fetch the data of a book, and if that communication fails, you would probably like to show the user a retry button which can be clicked by the user to retry fetching the data. So this is the fallback UI. Now we want to modify the error boundary to accept a custom fallback. So we'll update the error boundary from our previous episodes, and it will render a custom fallback component. Take a look at our component here. We are importing the logger service. We are importing the fallback UI which we just created, right? The component. And then if you take a look at the, a render function, we are going to take a look at the has error state. If there is an error, we are going to check whether we have a fallback or not. If there is a fallback, we are going to use that. and then we are going to, return that fallback component. We are going to set the title, we are going to set the message, and we are going to set on retry. So these are the different changes that we need to implement inside of this, error boundary that we have right now. So inside of the error boundary file, I am going to remove this code because you can easily find it on branch number 2, and then I am going to write the code for the newest version of error boundary, which takes advantage of that fallback UI component we just created. So as before, it has its constructor, the initial state, then it has the static get derived state from error, then the component did cache lifecycle method, logging to the backend API, or rather simulating that. Then we have handle retry. We are resetting the error state to retry rendering, and then the error, the render. If we have this fallback, we're going to use it. We're going to render the fallback component, setting the title, message, and on retry. Otherwise, if there is no error, we are going to simply render the children of this error boundary component. Now let's continue and talking about the different parts of this, new version of the error boundary component. This imports the custom fallback component. It is, like a component that shows a friendly error message. It could be, of course, in a separate file. And then instead of hard coding the fallback UI, instead of the render, we are using this component to kind of customize and reuse different callback UIs as components. We will create different callback UIs. So this is the part where we are showing the fallback. If the parent component passes a custom callback via the fallback prop, it will be used. If not, it will default to the fallback UI we just created. So the parent component is going to be able to pass a custom fallback UI, and we are going to create multiple fallback UIs in a minute. And then the render, we talked about the render part, right? So the render part is easy. If there is an error, if has error is true, we're going to render the fallback UI component. The component is passed through, the component has 3 props, title, message, and on retry. We talked about these, and we're going to pass them when we, render the fallback component. The handle retry method or function, when the fallback component triggers the, button, retry button, it resets the state. So it sets has error to false, error to null, to be able to retry whatever operation that threw, that error. So this causes the render to skip the fallback UI and re-render the original children, re-attempting to mount them. Now, this only makes sense if we have the opportunity to use different fallback UIs. Right now, we have only one fallback UI. This is the fallback UI. Component failed. This is the title, this is the message, and this is the retry, right? But it only makes sense if we have different fallbacks. So, first off, inside of our component right now, inside of the book list component, we are using this error boundary, but we are not specifying any fallback UIs. That means that the default callback, the default fallback UI will be used, and you can see this default fallback UI here. But we can also create custom fallbacks for specific parts of the component of the application. So for example, we are going to create this specific fallback UI. It is called book fallback JSX, and as you can see, it has a message. It has this on retry props. and it says, you know what, couldn't load this book. This book couldn't be loaded. And then we are going to render the message and we are going to render the retry. Let's continue implementing this, and then inside of the book list here, as the prop for error boundary, we are going to use this book fallback. So first we need to create this specific book fallback inside of our components. Book fallback.jsx. This is going to be the specific component or fallback UI component that we want to use when there is an error inside of the process that is going to fetch books. It is called book fallback. It has a message, and on retry, and as you can see, it is going to render the message and the title. I am going to get rid of this. So this is our book fallback. Now we need to come to the book list, and inside of this section we want to set this fallback prop to the book fallback. So inside of the book list here, I am going to set the fallback to book list book fallback. So if you take a look at the application, right now we are using this very custom, very specific fallback UI only for cases when a book cannot be loaded. It says couldn't load this book, failed to render book, error book, and then a button to retry. And we can click that, but nothing actually happens. Now resetting with retry, notice we added on retry callback. Clicking retry will reset the error state and attempt to render. This is helpful if the error is intermittent, like loading data. And this is something that we will probably explore further in upcoming episodes. So in this episode, as a summary, we talked about fallback UI, so a reusable styled fallback component. And then it had a prop fallback that allows us to pass specific fallback UIs per each component. And then we had onRetry that resets the state and allows the component to retry to be able to get the data one more time to reattempt the process that failed, that threw an error, to see if it can be if it can go through or not. So this is the way we can create different fallbacks for different components. We have one fallback UI, as you can see here. This is like a generic one that you can use all the time, but if you want, you can also create more specific fallback UIs, as you can see here, for specific components. For example, for the book component, we are using this book fallback. And this is the end of this episode. If you enjoyed watching this, please make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave a comment if you have anything to say, and stay tuned for the upcoming videos.